So we came back, on Friday from camp, a week-long children's camp, and it was fantastic. It was awesome. Just lives were touched and impacted from 8-year-olds all the way up to the oldest staff member there, which I think might have been me. So, Michelle's laughing, but I think it's true. So anyway, we just want to be able to share with you what happened at camp. And so before I talk, I want to show a camp video so that you get a flavor of our week. So as you can see, we had a lot of water and a lot of fun and a lot of Jesus. And it was awesome. And so, kids, it's challenge time. All the kids that were at camp, even if you don't want to, I want you to. Share a testimony. So why don't you guys start lining up, and staff, you can line up as well with them. Go ahead, come on up. No, down there. We still follow the rule. What? Yeah, sure. Okay. Look out there, not at me.
I got more communication from the Lord.
I got more direction from the Lord.
Oh, I see we're getting the more theme. So you can say whatever you want. It doesn't have to just be about more. Okay, look at them.
I really felt empowered when I got touched by the Lord when I was at kids camp.
Wait, Micah, come back here for a second. What did you get delivered from at camp?
Fear.
Of talking in front of people. Come on, keep scooting over.
Well, I heard that there was more people there than usual, so I thought that was really cool. And I got I felt God saying I had more authority.
Good. Very good.
I felt like this year of kids camp was more impacting than all the others, and I just felt like lots of people were healed there, and they were all having fun, and they learned more about Jesus.
That's very true. So one night, for those of you that don't know, right before camp, on the Tuesday before camp, I came down with strep throat. And so that was not so fun. And you prayed for me that Sunday. And then Monday, I still wasn't feeling that great. And then the antibiotic I was on was making my stomach, did a number on my stomach. So Tuesday night, before I was going to speak, after I took my medication after dinner, I got a really horrible stomach ache. It hurt so bad I couldn't stand up hardly during worship. And so that night I just went up and shared it in front of everyone, and the kids came up and they prayed for me, and like almost immediately it went away. So it was totally wonderful.
My favorite night at kids camp was probably the last one, because it was that thingy-majig, and it was like both spiritual and physical, and yeah, I thought that was cool. And my counselor said like through the week I like had more wisdom.
I really felt like I saw more of heaven. Like I felt like I hugged Jesus and even saw Gabriel, the angel. So
way cool.
On the first night of camp, we were worshiping, and I saw an angel walk into the room, and he just started. He didn't really have a mouth, but I could hear him in my head, and he was just telling me how much everyone loves me and how much God loves me.
During camp, I felt more happiness.
I was told I have more faith by both my counselors.
Awesome. Come on, go right ahead. You take as long as you want.
All right. So I had some things that the Lord wanted me to speak, and then during worship today, He just talked right through what I want to talk about. And so unstoppable God, that's who He is. That's who He is. And what was the next song, Lauren? No fear. I'm no longer, the third song, no longer a slave, but a child. And the whole week at Kid Camp, what we're doing is we're training King's kids. And that's the whole purpose. That's why we're there. It's not just to have fun or just have a week at camp. The two things that impacted me the most were the dinner with the King night. And it was like we were in the throne room. And these kids were his princes and princesses. And some of them didn't know what to do with themselves because they don't know that that's who they are. And so it was such an awesome night. The dads in the room went around and blessed each of the kids with a blessing. And I just felt to put flags around the room. And it was the throne room. And these kids that we're training, that's who they are. That's who we are too. But we're training these kids to know who they are because they're going to impact the world. They're going to go farther than we have. They're going to be stronger and do exploits that we've never even thought to do. And this week was training time for that. And these kids are learning, hey, wait a minute. I can stand on my own. I'm a King's kid. And then the other thing that impacted me was the more thingy. Because in the natural, we got dumped on. But in the spiritual, it opened up the heavens for more and more and more. I just kind of saw a channel that was just more rocks out of the way, more stuff out of the way. And that thing is powerful. When it hits you, you get hit. And that's the way the Lord is. He has more and more and more for us. And then in closing, the last song we sang, it was our wedding song. So He's training us up to be His kids. And not just to know who we are, but to know how to behave in the kingdom. To know how to treat other people and to know how to give out His love and be who He called us to be in the proper way. Not to be a snotty King's kid, but to be a loving, powerful King's kid. That's what we want to be. And I just saw that as we're singing that song, we were walking down the aisle towards our King. And He was standing there waiting for us. And I don't remember what the words were. And can you put up the second part of that song, the last one we sang? Yes. Yep. And that's who we are. The bride of Christ, standing redeemed. Heaven open over us. That's who we are, the bride of Christ, rising up. And to His name we will bring endless glory when we walk in who He created us to be.
Any other staff members that would like to come up and share? Oh, wow. You guys aren't feeling very bold today. I must tell you, this staff was fantastic. The teens that were there and I'll start with the counselors, the teenage counselors. They were phenomenal. I am so proud of the maturity and the responsibility that they walked in, that they carried, the love that they poured out. And so we just thank all of our high school students, junior high students, for pouring out a week with the kids. You're not used to being moms and dads. And so it was a new role for you to kind of step into. Hope it made you appreciate your parents. more. But many, many thanks to you. And then to the rest of our staff, Dan Hipple, I think that was the first time he was out there as a counselor, and he just did a fantastic job. He had a rather rambunctious and very short, I said the attention span of a gnat cabin, and he did a phenomenal job. All of our cooks, just everybody, Lauren and Michelle, Annie and Wayne, couldn't do it without them. There was just, it was just awesome. John Mack, oh, there was a guy that beat me in age. All right. But I know you're mama's baby boy, but you're still older than me. It was great to have John back out there after several years of not being able to be there. It was just wonderful having his presence on the campground, and he drove the kids to the lake every day and back. And so it was just an awesome team. I just love all of you so much and feel like we work together so beautifully to produce what the Lord wanted.
Can't believe nobody else had anything. I know. That's all right. Glenn's got something. He wasn't even there. He's got something.
Glenn wasn't there, but he wants to share.
Welcome to camp. This is what happens.
No, I'm not a camper, but my my granddaughter, Azella, got to go, and
It's all right. Okay. You got this. You got this. You got this. You got this.
We sponsored her to go, and she was just touched so much. And we were kind of worried because she didn't come to our church. She doesn't come to our church. So we're like, oh, I wonder, how's she gonna fit in? We're a little bit worried about that. But when she showed up, John had his granddaughter there, and they hit off with each other really well. And so, she wouldn't let her go out of her sight. And so they were friends in there, and we were praying, oh gosh, I hope they're in the same cabin. And they were, and they were in the same cabin. So that was really cool. And then we just stopped by there yesterday after lunch to talk to her to find out, hey, how was camp? And she goes, it was the best camp ever. And the food was the best food I ever had in my whole life. And I got to have dinner with the king, and she was just so impacted. She goes, I got my piggy bank now, and I'm putting money in it now for the next camp. That's how excited she was. I just had to share that.
No, at the camp, it was the night with the king. It really, that affected me, and I was the thing that affected me the most, and just seeing the kids, and like Chris said, that it was just this presence that was there. If you've ever been to our kids' camp or heard about it, the meals are always great. We have great food there, but it's usually running at about 100 to 110 decibels. It's just loud. The night with the king, it was dead silent in there. And the kids were, it was just, the kids were taking it in. When they would come in the door, James Anderson was our camp photographer, and he would take them over and get their picture. And you saw those in the video. It kind of dark in the light room, but that was the night with the king. They all got the special picture taken of them all dressed up. And then they would come over to me, and I was the maitre d', and they would have to tell me their cabin name, and I would see if there was a table for them. There was everybody had a table, but I always made them like, and who are you? And I know who they were. But so then they would go, but then we had the senior staff was at every table, and they were the servers. So John was there, Chris was at a table, Michelle, Timna. All of the people who were in charge of the entire camp stood at tables and served kids. And that was impactful. I felt bad because when I was done being the maitre d', and I would announce them when they came in. And there was a lot of people who didn't. Now, I've only seen it in the movies. I've never been to a palace in my life. But when they would come in, all of the gentlemen who were serving at the tables, if there was a ladies' cabin that came in, we would all escort the ladies to their tables. I would take the head counselor. I would announce what cabin they were from, and their cabin name. And I would to the room, and I did it loud, and I would walk them to their table. And it was funny. I get some of the senior counselors, because I offered my arm, and they looked at me like, whoa. And so then they'd take my arm and they'd start walking, but I wouldn't move. And then I would announce them, and then we would go. It was just really interesting just to see the dynamic that happened, because I think a girls' cabin came in first. I think it was Sela's cabin. They were the Pinksters. But they came in first, and they had to sit there, and they got to watch everybody come in, but they were quiet, and every table was quiet. Even when the meal started, it was quiet. It was quiet. But it was just to watch the senior staff serving kids. You know, if you want to be the best, make yourself the least. And I'm not saying that it was the least to serve, but to serve was just amazing. And I felt bad, because after I got everybody in the door, I watched everybody else work. And I stood there, and I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? So but I went around to the tables, and I asked them, how was your salad? And look, I'm glad to see you here. And I schmoozed. I guess that was my job. I don't know. But no, it impacted me. It was such a presence of the Lord that was on that room. And I mean, it was just sweet. And then praying for the kids. And I do want you to know, Glenn, that we grabbed the boys had certain kinds of rings, and the girls had other kinds. I grabbed a couple of each, and I just started saying, Lord, who do I pray for? Who do I pray? And actually, Isella was the first one that I just said, I got to pray for her. So I went over and I prayed for her directly first. So, but then it's just going around the room, and I mean, it was huge, and it was. And then I felt the Lord tell me to pray for my daughter. I'm like, oh, no. And I did it with only crying a little. So, but it was such a sweet presence at the camp the entire time. But it was that night, it was just heavy. It was thick, and it was so good. So, and then we got doused the next night, which was awesome.
Staff members, you can change your mind. Dan, come on up. And Lori, come on up. Are you waving your hands? I just meant for you to like jump up.
It was a wonderful week, and at the end, when we got doused, Chris shared that it's like Christmas time. God loves us so much that he wants to give us a very special gift because he loves us so much. And all I could think of was, God, thank you. This was such a gift to me. You know how it is, staff, when you go to something like this and you are just so honored and blessed. The first night, she talked about before you can get more, you need to have some. And that was so impacting to me because two of the boys in my cabin that were a little older gave their hearts to the Lord for the first time. And it wasn't just they prayed a prayer. It was they were moved, they were touched, they were broken. And then in our cabin time, they said, I have never felt anything like this before. I feel different. And all I could think of was, God, it was each one. It was Marcus in the kitchen. It was Mary making sure I had some coffee. It was everybody together, but it was an eternal change. We're going to see those two boys, Bodie and Asher, in heaven because of the work that everybody did, Larissa, and it's just so powerful. And then last, I just wanted to share the night of the King. I was served by John, and he's so good, and he was training. And then I started to catch on, okay, this is a training session in etiquette. So we were both kind of working on them, okay, napkins on the knee, are you left-handed, right-handed, let's pass this way. So that was fun. But when we got to pray for these kids, especially these older girls that needed to be affirmed, and Mackenzie was one of them, just to be able to speak the beauty of the Lord over these daughters, it was just tremendous. So thank you.
I'll concur to everything everybody else said. It was amazing. But one of the things that impacted me the most was I had one of the oldest girls' cabins, and I think all of them have been there before, and all of them are, for the most part, raised in the church and know the Lord. And the thing that impacted me the most is one of the nights we talked about what things that they had been affected by. And a lot of my girls, it was word curses. It was like things, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're this, you're that. And I thought, wow, how much? I mean, these girls, for the most part, are very protected. They're in loving families, and they're raised, and yet still, the enemy has gotten in there with those word curses and been able to discourage them and begin to try to tarnish their identity and who they are. And we got to see and I know it wasn't just my cabin, but we got to see a real restoration of identities at camp. Girls and boys beginning to see, that's not who I am. That's the enemy speaking to me. That's people that have brought me down by things they've said, but that's not who I am. That's just what somebody said to me. And we got to see a restoration of identities to where they began to see and believe the identity that Christ says and who they say. And it was just building block upon building block. And that's what I love about how camp runs. And I know God speaks to Chris, but it's not, we don't do everything for them. I feel like Chris builds a camp where we're just giving tools to them for success in life. And that's the thing that I was most impacted by. One time, all we were supposed to do was go back to our cabin, and we were supposed to lay on our bunks or our floor, and we were just supposed to listen to what the Lord said. And sure, every one of us counselors could have prayed, Lord, but it wasn't about that. It was about them hearing from the Lord and having the Lord speak to their heart specifically. And though we have lots of great things to say to them, and we do make an impact, I just think we're giving them tools. It was a week of them having tools imparted into their life to live successfully, to see who they are and to live that out. And so it was an incredible week for every one of us that was there. And I just, for everyone here, when you see the kids, don't be afraid to speak life over them. Don't be afraid. Don't think, oh, I wasn't there, or I don't know. But you guys have impact on their lives as well, even though you might not teach their class on Sunday or on Wednesday. Or you have, by your words and the power of your words, to speak life over these kids and to call forth what the destiny that God has spoken over their lives. So go for it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's great because they hit many of the themes of the message. And Dan shared about the first night when I talked about you can't have more until you have some. So that was our very first message, because I wanted the kids to, the theme was more, but I knew there would be some children there that had never asked Jesus into their hearts. And so we paved the way for that to happen. And, we usually start camp off every year with a salvation message. But this year, I don't know, there was just something different about the hearts and the lives. I mean, there were little boys up there that were just crying, and you could feel the Lord was just doing something so significant in their hearts and lives. And there's probably no greater joy than to see a young kid humble themselves and come up front and say, I want Jesus in my life. And so awesome night. And then after we had the kids get some, and we did talk about the fact that you don't get some of Jesus, you get all of Jesus. But then the revelation that comes, he just that more and more of him is revealed to you because he's so big. There's so many facets to him that it's more than we could comprehend, probably in our lifetime. And so then we had kids come forward that just wanted to get their revelation of Jesus expanded throughout the week. The first morning, so Tuesday morning, we played More, the game show. And you should have been there because I talked in a game show voice the whole time. And I cracked game show humor, that went right over the kids' heads, but made all the adults laugh. So I was competing, you know, like with Veggie Tales, there's always that stuff in there for the parents that have to watch the movies 1,000 times. So we just had fun. James was great because I had sent him this stuff, James Can, and I had a theme, you know, my game show theme song, and I had the audience cues for clap and laugh and say "aw" when people didn't get the right answer. And so it was just loads of fun. We just had a great time, and basically what I did was show the kids all these people in the Bible that had more. So we talked about David being a man with more bravery and more passion, and Solomon with more wisdom and more riches, and John with more revelation and love. And so we just had all these pairs, and then we had it set up kind of like the concentration game. Do you guys remember that? And so then the kids came up and they tried to create pairs. I had my game show assistants, Canatan and Rosa Pink, helped me out. That was Brad and Tori. And so we just had a really fun time, but hopefully they were just grasping how all the different faces of more, you know, there's just so much when you say more that it can look like. And Tuesday night was the night that Lori talked about, which was making room for more, that we all have junk inside. I made my junk were rocks inside of a big root beer float pitcher. I had two. One root beer float pitcher received way more, and the other one got full really quick because it had all these rocks inside of it. But the kids couldn't see the rocks because I had them covered up. And then we just talked about the things in our lives that are roadblocks, and anger and disobedience and fear. And then we kind of ended with labels, just the things that people have spoken over us that we believe that are not true, like that we're stupid, or that we don't amount to anything, or that we're unlovable, or we're unworthy. And so we wrapped that service up with the children. They listened to the Holy Spirit, and they wrote on a rock the thing that they felt was a roadblock in their life. And some of the rocks had 3 or 4 things written, not just one. And then they came up and we prayed and just broke that thing off, and they threw their rocks into a kiddie pool, which we said was, we're pretending that we threw it into the sea where it would be no more. And I put all the rocks the last day into a box, and the senior staff, we're going to go out to the lake one day together and just chuck all those rocks. We will make sure people are not in the water, but we will chuck all those rocks in the water. We'll make sure we are all in a good frame of mind when we go. And then we're just going to throw all those things, the things that the kids got rid of. And I mean, we were looking through them, and I mean, some of them are really deep, deep things, you know, fear and anger with my siblings. And several kids got delivered of just having a short fuse with their siblings, and being afraid of, you know, different things, people and darkness and those kind of things. So it was a super powerful night. Lots and lots of crying that night, but then we went into a celebration of being free. I'm just highlighting some of these because I know that sometimes when kids come back and they say, what happened at camp? And they say, it's great. It was so good. And then it's hard. So these are giving you some little things that you can say, oh, so what happened that night? And you can check with them. The next day we did declaring his promises, and we talked about the power of the tongue. We'd done this here at Zion during a blast service, but I wanted all the children that were there. We had 65 campers this year. That was up 14 kids from last year. So that was exciting to have so many more children there. And just talking about the power of the tongue and how our mouth can bless and it can curse, and just training our mouths. Like we go to weight training, but to build up muscles, but training our mouths to be mouths that would speak words of blessing and encouragement and sow life. And so they had a list of declarations, and we had teams, and they went, some of the pictures you saw of different groups at the picnic tables and on the basketball court, they just went and they practiced declaring things as a team together. And then later that afternoon, they had cameras, and they were supposed to illustrate in pictorial form with the camera shots those same declarations. And so those pictures are posted. I put a post this morning to the counselors that if you would label some of those, if you remember, I know I labeled one where some little girls had their heads back laughing and Johnny was whispering in their ear, and it said, "I laugh uproariously when I hear the lies of the devil." And so I assumed Johnny was portraying the devil in that picture. And the little girls just had their heads thrown back and they were laughing. But it would be awesome, counselors or kids, if you remember, to just underneath on Facebook, if you would tag those. I just think it would be an awesome way to release further the declarations that we were making on Facebook. Let's proclaim the word of the Lord and make those declarations and that you captured in such a fun way with pictures. They also had props they had to use, and so that's why some of the kids have Santa Claus hats and baseball bats and things like that in their photos. A wig. And did you guys see that when Lauren, the miracle? Kids prayed for him, and all of a sudden he had hair. And what was funny is that it was a gray wig, and Reese was walking up, and he thought that it was John. So he was about ready to tap on Lauren and say, "Mr. John," but then he realized it was Lauren. But yeah, he got gray hair, but it was still hair. The next night was dinner with the king, and people have shared about that, but it was just... I bawled for the first 3 cabins that came in. It was just so overwhelming to see their faces. The little kids that were out, staff children that were there that weren't campers, they walked in and they asked who was getting married. I mean, that's how pretty we had it decorated. It was just so nice. And the comments were, "I don't deserve this. This is way too fancy. I'm not good enough for how pretty this is." And so it just kind of sewed into them their royalty of who they are in the Lord, and just was so precious. And it undid me watching them come in, and I was just crying. Especially the girls were, I mean, they just giggled because they didn't know what to do, and they were so nervous and uncomfortable in the situation that it just made them giggle. But just spoke to them about being adopted as sons and daughters of the King, and that they were royalty. And as they received their blessing from the Father, they also got a ring put on their finger. And it was a beautiful evening. The next morning, I spoke about my more is different than your more. And I talked about how such a big problem, I think, in Christianity is that we think that we have to all look the same, even in our giftedness, and we don't get excited about the things that are different that God gives us. If we don't move out in the same way. I mean, I've been in places where people will pray more, and sometimes I feel like they're praying the more so that you'll get the jerks, or you'll laugh, or you'll cry, or you'll lay on the floor. But God's more is different for everyone. So where somebody might get blasted and get more, their more might be holy laughter in a given moment. Someone else's more may just be an overwhelming sense of the Lord's peace. And so in the same moment, everybody's more can look the same. We had some girls that were laughing and crying out there. They were all one cabin, and so kind of the spirit of, it would feed. Their whole cabin at one point would be crying, and and then other kids were thinking that they didn't get Jesus because they weren't crying. And so we just talked the whole morning about how the authority, they get the whole Jesus, same Jesus you get. Their revelation may not totally be to the level yours is, but I can tell you these guys got equipped and zapped at camp, and we are so blessed to have them in the house. So if we could have kids and staff come forward, and I'm just going to have people come on up, kids and staff, and I just want you to release an impartation of the more that you had at camp this week. to those in the congregation that want to receive an impartation of more this morning, we invite you to just come up and partake.